When people are mean and cruel to others online, it can have a real impact. But when you see it happen, you can have an impact too. It's up to you whether you make things better or worse. Just because something happens online, that doesn't mean it doesn't hurt. But when something happens online that makes us upset, it can be harder to know what to do about it. Let's start with a quick exercise. Take out a piece of paper and write down 3 things that people have done that have made you happy recently, and 3 that made you mad. These can be either online or offline. We'll pause until you're done. Now think back to those moments and try to remember how you felt. How long did you stay angry or happy? What did feeling that way make you do? What did it make you want to do? Happiness and anger are examples of hot emotions that can be hard to control and can make us do things we normally wouldn't. What are some other hot emotions? Let's pause to name a few. What emotions did you think of? Some common hot emotions are fear, excitement, frustration, and jealousy. Do we always know when we're feeling these hot emotions? What might be some times when we're feeling them without realizing it? Let's pause to think about that. What did you think of? Here's an example. When we get scared, the feeling of being afraid doesn't go away, even if the thing we're scared of does, or even if we find out it wasn't really scary to begin with. How do we feel when we're happy or excited? What are the ways our body shows that we're feeling a hot emotion? Let's pause to talk about it. What examples did you think of? Here are some of the most common clues that you're feeling a hot emotion. Your heart beats faster, your muscles may feel tense, you may shiver, you may hold your breath without realizing it. It's hard to think clearly when we're feeling a hot emotion. Hot emotions make it harder to slow ourselves down. When something triggers a hot emotion, we usually want to do something about it right away. We also often take things a lot more personally when we're feeling hot emotions, so we may react more strongly to things, which can make what we're feeling even stronger. What can happen if we don't realize that we're feeling a hot emotion? We can do things without thinking about them, react differently to things than we otherwise would, or provoke a reaction in someone that they otherwise wouldn't have. What does the word empathy mean? Let's pause for a moment to talk about it. There are actually 2 different kinds of empathy. Affective empathy is feeling what other people feel, like when you get sad because something bad happened to your friend. Cognitive empathy is recognizing how other people feel, like when you're able to tell your friend is angry, even if she doesn't say anything. What are the clues that tell us how someone is feeling? For instance, think about a time you knew that a friend was mad about something. How did you know that? Let's pause to think about it. Here are some examples of what we call empathy cues, things that give you a hint about how other people are feeling. The look on their face, the tone of their voice, their body language, like if they seem tense or relaxed, and if they seem to be preoccupied with something. Let's think about communicating with people online, like on social networks, and offline. How are they different? We'll pause for a few minutes to talk about it. Probably the biggest difference when you're talking to someone offline is that you can see them, their facial expression, and their body language. And you can hear their tone of voice, which is a big clue to how they're feeling. Of course, they can see and hear you too. Usually when you talk to someone offline, only the people who are actually there can hear what you're saying, and you can tell how people react to what you say. But when you're online, you usually can't see people when you're communicating with them, unless you're video chatting, and you can't hear their tone of voice, plus they can't see or hear you. As well, there's a permanent record of whatever you say, and it can be shared, spread, and seen by other people. And of course, you can't see how people react to what you're saying, so if you hurt someone's feelings by accident, you won't realize it right away. One thing that's just as important online as offline is how you react when you see someone being targeted by mean or cruel behavior. You can make a big difference both in how the target feels and in whether or not things like insults, sharing personal or embarrassing photos, and racist or sexist comments are considered normal in your online spaces. Let's watch a short video that shows a pretty typical example of someone being mean to someone else online. This shows how there isn't always a clear line between online and offline bullying. Something kind of embarrassing happened to Khalil in class, but Aaron sharing the photo made it a lot worse. Imagine you were one of the people who saw Aaron's post. How would you feel in this situation? What could you do to resolve this situation? Who would be affected by what you do? Let's pause for a few minutes to talk about that. Sometimes, like in this case, a cyberbullying situation may seem pretty clear, but before you act, it's important to ask yourself if you know the whole story. What looks like bullying could be someone fighting back against a bully, and what looks like just a joke might really hurt someone's feelings. That doesn't mean you shouldn't do anything, but it does mean you need to think about what the best way to help is. Another thing to ask yourself, am I helping or just helping my friends? We all want to help our friends, and we count on our friends to help us, but before you take your friend's side, ask yourself if you'd do the same thing if they weren't your friend. Finally, you should ask yourself if you're making excuses for what's happening. Sometimes we come up with reasons not to do something that we know is right. A lot of the time, those reasons are based on the values of the group we're in. Ask yourself if you're doing any of these. Minimizing what happened by saying things like, it's just a joke. Denying that what happened hurt the target. Remember, just because something wouldn't hurt your feelings doesn't mean it wouldn't hurt someone else. Blaming the target by saying they did something to deserve it. And avoiding your own responsibility by saying it's someone else's problem. There are a lot of things you can do to help someone who's being bullied, but some work better than others at different times, and some of them can sometimes make things worse. Half of Canadian kids have chosen not to do anything about cyberbullying because they thought it would make things worse for the target, and 2/3 have chosen not to do anything because they thought it might make them a target. Make sure you're not doing any of these things that kids usually say make things worse. Confronting any of the people involved in a public space where other people can see what you're saying or posting. Sharing what's happening with other people by forwarding, upvoting, and so on. Laughing at what's happening. And not doing anything. Not doing anything when we witness meanness can make the target feel like nobody cares about them, which can be as bad as siding with the person being mean. Because of that, we need to think carefully and find out as much as we can about the situation before we intervene. Think carefully before you do one of these things that kids say sometimes makes things better, but may make you a target. Trying to mediate between two people who are in conflict online. Documenting what's happening by taking a screenshot so you can help the target report it later if they want to. And confronting someone privately to tell them you disagree with what they're doing. Here's a list of things you can do that kids who've been targets of bullying say usually make things better and won't make things worse. Tell an adult that you trust to help, like a parent, a teacher, or a counselor. Talk to the target of the bullying about how they'd like you to help. Post something nice about the target to show you don't agree with what's happening, and, the top-rated strategy in our research, tell the target privately that you think what's happening to them is wrong. That's a lot to remember. To help, Media Smarts has made a tool called Impact that helps you figure out what to do when you witness cyberbullying and gives you tips on how to do it. You can use it when you actually do see cyberbullying, but you can also use it to practice and plan ahead. Impact works by asking you questions about what's happening. Each question is based on the things that youth in our research told us they were concerned about. Your answers will determine the best and safest way to respond. When Aaron shared that embarrassing picture of Khalil, for example, it was pretty clear who was at fault, but that's not always going to be the case. Answering yes to the first question brings us to this one. Do you think Aaron meant to hurt Khalil's feelings, or was he just kidding? It's hard to tell just from what we saw in the video, but let's suppose he wasn't trying to be mean and just thought it was funny. Just because something was meant as a joke, though, doesn't mean it didn't hurt. And just because someone doesn't seem upset doesn't mean it didn't hurt either. There are a lot of reasons why someone might not want other people to know that something hurt their feelings. Our questions about how to respond to what happened to Khalil land us here. How to tell someone privately that you don't agree with what happened. There are even a few sample phrases you can use if you can't find the words. Remember, there's always something you can do to help. Now let's take a look at another video that's a slightly more complicated situation. Now that you've seen the video, take a few minutes to go to the Impact website and use the tool to decide what to do. In some cases, you may have to guess or just decide how to answer, but that's fine. You don't always have the whole story in real life either. Let's pause for a few minutes while you play through the scenario and then share what you think is the best thing to do. It's pretty clear that Katie is wrong to make fun of Jody, but how about Amelia? Did she have a right to share a picture of her even though Jody was embarrassed by it? Whose rights are more important? Is there a way to find a compromise between them? Let's pause for a moment so you can talk about that. This is an example of a moral dilemma where there's no clear right answer. Amelia does have a right to share the picture, but most people would agree she should respect Jody's wishes too, especially after Jody asks her to take the picture down. The best way to avoid this would have been for Amelia to ask Jody before posting the picture. In fact, most Canadian kids expect their friends to ask them before posting a picture with them in it, even if there's nothing embarrassing about it. If she had, they might have been able to find a compromise, like cropping Jody out of the picture before posting it, or finding another picture from the same event where Jody's braces weren't visible. Now let's look at another video with a trickier moral dilemma. It can be really tempting to want to get back at somebody for something they did to you or to a friend of yours. In fact, those are the second and third most common reasons Canadian kids give for doing mean and cruel things online. Just joking around is first. But that almost always just makes things worse, and it gives them a reason to complain about you. Here are some tips to help keep a conflict or misunderstanding from turning into real drama. Don't respond right away. When something happens that gets you upset, take some time to let the first rush of anger or fear fade away. If you can, talk things out in person rather than online. Remember that other people can't tell how you're feeling online either, so it's easy for drama to blow up. Talk to your friends and family about how you're feeling. Kids consistently say that just having someone listen to them is one of the most effective ways of dealing with online conflict. Don't ask your friends to back you up. Getting the same message over and over again, even if it's from your friends taking your side in an argument, can make angry feelings a lot more intense. It can also make the drama spread and turn into a much bigger conflict. Keep an eye on your own feelings. It's hard to make good decisions when you're mad, scared, or embarrassed. If your heart's racing or you're feeling tense, it's time to get offline for a while. It's important not to make things worse when you react to cyberbullying, but remember, there's always something you can do to help. People who've been cyberbullied say that one of the worst things about it is the feeling that nobody cares about them or supports them. By reaching out, you can have an impact. Thank you.